Welcome home. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're going to get the crab cake tour back at it. I tell you, this February thing's tough. 20 degrees in the morning. I used to sort of vacation this time of year. Right now, I'm sort of doing some things over here at Baltimore Positive in regard to Orioles season and the crab cake tour and our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll get back to giving all this stuff away. Our friends at Window Nation as well, 86690 Nation. We got some new sponsors coming on. We have cool stuff happening with the Liberty Pure solutions and some water treatment and some information there. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare, want to give them some love as we get ready. There's an exhale, right? Like after the Super Bowl, after you lose an AFC championship game at home, sort of unprecedented after you get news that the sun is going to shine. I keep going the wrong side of the monitor. The sun is going to shine again over Camden Yards, and Cal Ripken's going to be an owner of the team by the time I'm eating snowballs and they're melting in the summer, right? Luke Jones joins us now. Luke, you and I usually go at this with Ravens, offense, coordinator, coaching, Lamar, contract, Acosta, Indianapolis. Let's get on a plane. Let's go freeze. Let's go drink all night at the Sun King Brewing Company. Let's honor the great Peter King, who retired this week. But instead, this exhale period, especially when I'm thinking politics, Trump's on my timeline, hockey, basketball, the things that you would fall into, the Terps. But this spring training thing where Rock Kabako's tweeting out video of some guy hitting a home run or and I got to be paying attention to this. I don't know. This feels like an exhale for sports for me, where I'm getting ready for opening day. I'm getting ready for a March Madness. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen here. But if you and I are doing 6 a.m. Monday morning radio on the last week of February in a leap year, there's no Olympics. There's no Maryland's no good. Lacrosse is early, whatever even it would be. This is a weirdly slow time, but it is giddy. In the regard to sports fans, we want to talk about something, even if it's, something as important as the wide receiver having domestic issues and people wanting to not talk about. There's just a lot. There's stuff happening, but none of it's happening this week where we're buying tickets for it and the game's happening.
Yeah. I think there's plenty happening as far as what's coming up, but as it pertains to this specific week, it's not a whole lot. Now, I will say this. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, the combine does start this week. And if you're really super into the draft, NFL Network's going to have the coverage of the workouts later in the week, and there's all that. But for a lot of fans, and even frankly, pulling back the curtain, a lot of media, there's only so much that's going to stem from that's really headline worthy right now. John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta are both going to speak in Indy. I'm guessing we're not going to hear a whole lot of substance. We're going to hear talk. They're going to talk about the positions of need that the Ravens have. They're going to talk in very general terms about a Justin Madubuike and whether they're going to place the franchise tag on him and their other pending free agents and what's going to happen there. And on the flip side, Orioles. Grapefruit League games have started. That's great. Had a chance to watch the lousy center field camera on Masson on Saturday, and
that was
I was having a migraine.
I called my wife in on the third at bat. And I said, please come in here and tell me how you can watch this. And she's like, oh my God, it's making, and she has eye issues from her kid. She's like, it's making my head hurt. And I'm like, I just turned it off. I'm like, I want to watch it, man, but I can't watch it. It's making me physically ill. And I was emceeing this LLS event on Saturday, but I was geeked up. I put it on at 12:32, right? And I'm watching Rock sitting out there with some dude I've never seen before. Maybe I saw him last year in some pregame show, but I'm like, who's the dude? Well, okay. And then Palmer's basically saying they're not at the game. And I'm like, oh my God, we need new owners here. And this is the stuff that used to set me off a little bit. And I socialed about it, but in the notion that there's going to be a new owner, in this hope that this is really going to happen. And maybe I've been told by smart people, I'm not being naive. This is really going to happen. That's why because you and I haven't talked about it a lot in the aftermath of the football thing happening and, us doing the charity week and all that. I really hope it happens, and I know the league everybody wants it to happen. I hope Mama Angelos wants it to happen because inevitably she's the one that's going to be signing, that on for that. I hope it all gets done, But when things like that happen, it just shines like the Bono spotlight, on how awful it is. And I mean, this is the first pitch of spring training when they haven't had programming in 4.5 months. Where I mean, clearly I'm paying for it. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
stealing it. It's not Super TV with my toaster. Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm paying them for the product, and I don't think it's a real high bar to just expect something that's professional. That again, the measurement for all of this isn't just whether I have a press pass back in my own world, because it is. People keep asking me, when will you know it's fixed? When I'm sitting in the press box like a normal reporter and being treated like a normal citizen and having people wave hello because I'm from Baltimore and I love the team and I wear a hat. My last name's Aparicio and it's the reason I'm here. Like, I'll feel like it's fixed, but there's so many signs for everyone out there to just know how awful it is. And I continue to write about how awful it is. And people still, I'm negative. I did 78 charity pieces last week, and I'm the negative guy. That no, it's awful. And it's apparent how awful. And I just hope, and I've said this to you, I hope that when the light comes up, that they really do it's significant. Next spring training, there needs to be 28 games on, right? You know what I mean? There needs to be like a real change in all of it. All of it. It just needs to all be changed other than Mike Elias and what's going on the field. But every other aspect of it is so awful that I just can't get over it. But I keep thinking like, here comes the brighter day, and I really hope it happens.
Yeah, and that's look. I don't want to sit here and talk about Masson and its shortcomings, to put it in the kindest way possible, because we've talked about that for a long, long time, and because you're hoping a new day is coming much sooner rather than later. But yeah, for me, it's a reminder, and I'll leave it at this because I
But it
don't
is
want
the
to.
presentation of the
But
game.
it
It
is,
is
but I
what they
don't.
present, and they don't present anything for the next 5 days, right? Like they only put a game on a week or whatever, right? Like so, this is their way of selling their sport, and it's the reason it's not as great as it could be. And at some point, the Rubenstein group comes in. You want to pay Rutschman, you want to pay the money has to come from us. What I can't turn the game off in the first inning of the first day because I can't physically watch it. I mean, it's
Well,
unbelievable.
I, you didn't have to turn the game off. You decided to do that. But your point, look, I'm not going to disagree, and I don't again, I don't want to talk 30 minutes about the awfulness of Masson because we've done that for 15. I've done that for 15 years with you right now, and it's a reminder, and I'll leave it at this because I don't want to marginalize what's happening on the field because fans are really excited about that, and for the first time in several years, and going back, of course, last year, of course, too, but it's a reminder of how much work there is to be done for the new ownership group. It's just one of many things as we've talked about. As much as things on the field are looking up and up and up and up after a 101 win season, there's a lot to do on the business side, beginning with Masson, beginning with what the renovations for Camden Yards are going to look like, and the investments being made there. So, but
But
yeah,
the
I
opening
mean,
day for every single fan was 12:30.
I
Like
hear.
people were
Well,
really excited about. Like no, I mean, I felt like
hear you.
if there was it was a destination. I mean, bars all over Facebook were 1 o'clock. Come in,
Sure.
we have drink specials. Come watch the Orioles. And and I'm in loonies and the screen's going like like
Well,
I'm just thinking to myself like new ownership can't come fast enough
sure.
to rescue this because everything else we're going to talk about, Cowser, Holiday, just keep, we'll get into that.
Mhm.
All of that makes us tune in at 12:30. You know what I mean? It makes you want to spend too much on opening day tickets and start to even look at the calendar and thinking, hey, man, Luke, you want to go up to Toronto, get your passport out, let's go see a game or whatever. And we got that, there's a solar eclipse coming through, right? On April the 8th.
I've heard, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So like that was coming through Buffalo, and I was like, "Where's the games?" And like, "Where are the Orioles that week?" So anyway, I'm thinking about like, how can I have fun with the Orioles again? And I'm thinking maybe you and I should just go to spring training because if we go to spring training, the screen won't go up and down. That's what I'm thinking.
I'll say this, and I saw a number of people acknowledge this. And look, I watched some other spring training games. It can be windy in Sarasota, just like it can be at any spring training site. However, this was a good lesson of when you do it with a skeleton crew. Clearly, the broadcasters were not in Sarasota, you're going to have more issues. And yeah, there were some other games I watched, and yeah, the center field camera can have some issues from time to time. I'm not disputing that. Masson's not alone in that reality of spring baseball, but
Just
if
do
you are
better.
doing,
That's all. Just do better.
of
I mean,
course,
but
but that's
that's what got me thrown out 20 years ago was saying do better than this. And I know that the Rubenstein group, and I guess that is the hope for me. The hope for me is, you know what, it's a stupid spring training game on a Saturday. You know, like, okay, fine, great. The team itself and what's going to happen, who's going to play second base, shortstop, it is full of intrigue. It really is. And I think that's why I want to
sure.
watch the games where they don't shake and want to I'm the fish chasing the hook.
Yeah.
The team is the hook. There's no doubt about that. And who's going to pitch? There's a lot of intrigue in this spring training. It's not a whole bunch of set roster pieces like it was in the Davey Johnson era.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't a ton, but the ones that are open, it's intriguing. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't begin with a Kyle Bradish update. I mean, he's throwing. The so far so good. I mean, that's about all you can say, right? I mean, it's not, there's not anything concrete other than he's increasing a throwing progression. He said that he's felt good after throwing. Is he throwing bullpen sessions yet? Is he throwing sim games yet? No. And to me, until we get to that point, that's about where the update begins and ends, right? He's throwing from 60 feet, 75 feet, 90 feet. So far, so good. Hey, it's better than the alternative of him playing catch from 60 feet and his arm hurts and he's getting Tommy John surgery right away. So, we'll just have to see. But in the meantime, there is more intrigue. Cole Irvin, for example, he didn't start Saturday, pitched Sunday. Did get a chance to see a little bit of that. That was on the Pittsburgh cable channel since they were playing in Bradenton, right up the road from Sarasota. But velocity was up. He looked good. He's missing bats, and that's not something you typically think of with Cole Irvin. So there's a perfect example, though. As much as you talk about the disappointment of not knowing what's going to happen with Bradish for the entirety of the season, John Means knowing that he's behind, he's not injured, but knowing he's not going to be ready for opening day. I mean, Tyler Wells, Cole Irvin, step on up. I mean, this is your opportunity, and I think Cole Irvin's a guy that we spent some time talking about last offseason when they acquired him via trade, and we thought he would factor into this rotation more than he did. Had the really bad starts in April, got sent down. The command was off, the control was off, which was uncharacteristic for what he had done up to that point in his career. And very quietly, he came back, and I know he had a couple stints where he was up and down, but I think his ERA, I mean, he had a sub 4, his ERA was in the low threes from that point on. Now, it was mixed between some starts and some bullpen appearances, but the point is he quietly pitched pretty well for them over the final 4 months of the season after that stint at Norfolk. So you're going to need that. Whether Kyle Bradish comes back and pitches and is healthy at some point in time or not, you're going to need more than just your projected 5 starters. I mean, that's just reality. Everyone knows that. So it's good
Well,
to
I
see
mean,
Cole Irvin
I like to
throw
always go
hard.
back to like Jamie Moyer, and I was there the year that he was sort of a throwaway guy and whatever. Then he goes on and pitches 15 years and like figures it out. And for guys that were high ceiling guys, and that's pretty much, these guys take a gander on guys and the amount of guys they're going to need with injuries and everything else being factored into it. That, you get a guy in a Bundy trade that a couple of years later you get mileage out of. The relief pitcher, Batista's now going to miss a year. I mean, everything that shows up on my timeline are about how many pitchers in this modern era are having surgeries and the training that we're going through. That if you and I were doing a legitimate Radio Row baseball piece and they shut the league down and we got together and we were really going to talk about the sport and what's going on with the sport with pitchers and arms and all of that. But the one thing about this group from Houston straight through is almost every year they make a guy. They find a pitcher that they can do something with velo, with stretching him out, with taking a starter, making him a reliever making him a starter, finding roles for people, even like finding whatever they found with Cano last year for
Mm-hmm.
a month that he's like the greatest relief pitcher in the history. He's Bruce Sutter for a month, right? I don't. These guys are sort of geniuses about this. And when I start to see like Cole Irvin, day 2, like throwing the ball harder than he ever has, I'm thinking, these guys know stuff. And it's not like it was before where, a guy goes away and comes back 25 pounds heavier and we're all winking about what they were doing back in the day. And like all that. This is legitimate sports science stuff where they take guys' strengths and say, if you can do 2% better on this, figure out one pitch, one motion, one arm slot, one thing that we have figured out about your body, about your arm, about your height, about your wingspan, about the way the rotation comes off your fingers and spin rate, all of the science of all of this. These guys are really on the forefront of this. And that's why I sit here on the outside. If I were on the inside, they'd probably lie to me and run for me as if I had a badge, right? And I mean, last time I did, I sat at the kids' table. But if I really wanted to learn about this, like at a high level, these guys are the mad scientists of this. And there's a part of it, much like we did with DaCosta and Ozzie when they could draft Ed Reed or figure out how to find Joe Flacco when they needed him, right? In a draft. These guys can take yours and find guys, Rule 5, double A pitchers that they're getting in deals and turn them into a good relief pitcher, turn them into a one-trick pony that can be very, very useful. And that's, I guess that's the brilliance of Elias and Meidel and this group and the way they're training pitchers.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think on the pitching side, there's still a lot to prove for this group because we haven't seen them draft a ton of pitchers, right? I mean, we've talked about that every year. It's been college hitters and it's been, a Gunnar Henderson type, who obviously was a major flagship individual for their player development, having drafted him out of high school.
Like them being a sure thing, like a running back where like pitchers' arms fall off. So they're, by their very nature, you draft 4, one's arm's going to fall off before he gets to AAA. Like, and at least with the hitters, you stand a chance. Like, keeping your job, I guess, right?
Yeah. But I mean, really what you just described, though, it's a 4-letter word to so many older baseball fans, and not all. And I want to be clear, I don't want to make too many generalizations, but the word analytics, information, really, it's information. It's taking, yes, data, but things that you've learned and things that you see about a player. And, you identify a pitcher that was somewhere else and maybe didn't have the best numbers, but you say, you know what? Guy throws a really good slider. Why don't you throw that more? I mean, that's just a really simple example there that, it's general, but they've had guys like that where someone has a really good changeup or, they're throwing a 2-seam fastball, but their 4-seam fastball seems to be better and has, a pretty good spin rate. And why isn't he throwing that? And all of those different things. But it goes back to a term that you and I talked about a lot, and the Astros cheating scandal aside was talked about a lot. The idea of growth mindset, the idea of identifying players, identifying scouts and people within your front office and coaches who aren't satisfied with the status quo, aren't satisfied with the idea of a player being considered a finished product at any point in time. Not just talking about guys in the minor leagues, but I mean, one of the early stories of spring training, and we'll see how it plays out. But Corbin Burns, a guy who's won a Cy Young Award, he's been working on a different breaking pitch, supposedly, and trying to expand his repertoire, which makes sense for him, not just for a new team, but hey, he's going to be a free agent at the end of this year, so he's trying to get paid. He's going to get paid, but he's trying to get paid the absolute most he can. So, that everyone.
Oh, he's got a chance to be a World Series MVP. Free agent.
Sure.
Like literally.
Sure.
Right?
You hope so. Yeah. I mean, the Orioles certainly hope so. So, but the point is with all of that, you have information, you have technology, you have player tracking, you have, yes, statistics that weren't necessarily there 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly weren't there 20 years ago, and you use it. And that doesn't mean that it's fail proof. That doesn't mean that you're not going to run into some bumps in the road. And yeah, just because you have all this information about pitchers doesn't mean that they're not going to still get hurt. And we've seen that here firsthand with the Orioles with Batista, and you hope not, but we know what the odds typically will tell us about what's going to happen with Kyle Bradish here. But in the meantime, you are trying to develop other guys, and you said it. I mean, Yennier Cano, okay, he's not going to duplicate what he did in April, May, June, but he was still a good reliever the rest of the year. It's just he wasn't this ungodly, untouchable reliever, right? But the fact is, look at what he was when they acquired him from Minnesota, when they traded Jorge Lopez, he was a mess. I mean, he was a guy, I mean, Ben McDonald said it, that was wondering, why is this guy even on the 40-man roster? He thought that going into last spring, and you see what he became. So that's not to minimize the concerns in the bullpen without Felix Bautista. I mean, you're talking about a really special reliever you're not going to have. That's not to minimize the concern of the potential loss of Kyle Bradish. That's really going to hurt if he
No,
can't
hang
pitch.
on a second.
But
This is where I step up and say Batista wasn't all that special till he was. Cano wasn't anything
sure,
until he was. And that's where I think these guys, and look, man, I was down there in Fort Lauderdale where they're lifting weights in a back alley and they did, I'm seriously, right? I think somebody said in the broadcast, maybe it was Palmer or no, it wasn't even Palmer. It was somebody in the broadcast that something about Richie Bancells would wink down the aisle in Fort Lauderdale or something like that. I heard something over the weekend, and I'm thinking to myself, now they're sequestered in the back. Maybe it was Rakabaka that said that in the pregame. Now
mm-hmm.
they're sequestered over here, sequestered over there, and I'm thinking, yeah, and they actually have success, and they actually figure out how to take guys. And I'm going to make a broad generalization here that'll make you chuckle. And if it gets back to Dave Johnson, I'll make him chuckle. But there wasn't much that Greg Maddux had that Dave Johnson didn't have in regard to physicality, in regard to being right-handed, in regard to being a command pitcher, in regard to never, breaking radar guns or whatever. And one goes to the Hall of Fame, and one's a serviceable major league pitcher and on that fringe of this time of the year saying, can he be our number 4, number 5? And Jamie Moyer was that guy. And could go to the Hall of Fame at that point in their life, late 20s. And I see pitchers in this system that find a thing that modern science would have them find, that at least can have them be whatever the best they can be is, because these aren't bums. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we would say Bruce Zimmerman, he's just, quad, what, I don't know, man. Like it's really hard to get anybody out at the major leagues and to hang around for a period of time and, be a triple A Bull Durham guy, in and out. The difference between that and being Yenny or Cano for a month, or what we perceive Batista to be now that he wasn't 2 years ago, right? And these guys that make major steps up, this is the time they do that, and they do that, to your point with Corbin Burns, working on a new pitch, they can't work on a new pitch in November and December. They're not throwing the baseball, right? This is when they get a chance to air that out, and I guess that's what makes this franchise, my God, I'm saying this out loud, so interesting and so
Yeah.
fascinating, is that they are cutting edge about how a guy that last year got farmed out in June because he was no good, come back and maybe win 15, 18 games, maybe make 30 starts this year because he just in March figures it out and winds up in the rotation because Means can't do it. And, Bradish's arms no good, whatever. There are opportunities here. And,
Sure.
and on good teams, and I keep referencing the Moyer thing because it's something it makes me sound like an old man, and that's fine. But it's a great example, dude. I was there every day when Jamie Moyer's doing March Madness pool cards, and he's like literally not going to make the team wearing number 82. You know what I mean? And 15 years later, because he figures it out. And this is when guys figure it out. This is when it's all fun and games to us, and they're blowing bubbles on spring training or whatever. Man, guys are fighting for their lives down there as much as they're trying to fish and golf and do whatever. But in an organization like this, they can make a lot of money here.
Yeah, and look, I mean, a couple things. I'll give you a more modern example than Jamie Moyer. How about John Means? I mean, John Means in
Sure.
2018 literally was on his couch at home, and the Orioles were limping to that historically terrible last season they had under Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette. They had traded away guys. They needed arms. I mean, John Means was called off the couch and he pitched at Fenway and got knocked around because the perception of what he was at that point was a guy that was an organizational arm, no more than that. And we saw what and I don't want to say it was only because of Mike Elias and the new baseball ops coming in. John Means put in the work, right? And so many of these guys, and this goes back to the growth mindset. One thing I'll disagree with you about a little bit is it's not just coming to spring training. Guys seek out instruction, whether it's private instruction, facilities like Driveline, different things like that over the off season where a pitcher or a hitter will rebuild his swing, whatever it might be, guys that are trying to refine what they do. Really, uh, it was so much more of an art compared to a science. And that's not to belittle what process was before in terms of player development and working on things. I mean, Ted Williams talked about the idea of launch angle and things like that. He just didn't have StatCast tracking it for him, right? So Jim
I wish my
Palmer,
father were alive this time of year, man. My
yeah, I mean,
father bought the science of hitting and gave it to me when I was 5 years old. And he
right. I
used
mean,
to buy these reels about Rod Carew and how it like, and my dad loved that stuff, man.
yeah. I mean, it's always been a thing. It's just now there are tools that quantify it. I mean, the idea of spin rate, late life on a fastball, right? You know, a fastball that's perceived to have some rise. That's a fastball that has a really good spin rate. So it's just things that, you know, concepts that had always been talked about to some degree. It's just now analytics, information. I'll keep using that word, information that you now have that you can quantify some of those ideas. And now it's not just a case of, okay, there might be a pitcher, or how about this, a specific coach who is really, really gifted. Those coaches were so valuable because, you know, you didn't have technology that helped you with this. Now,
Walt Riniak would love all this, right?
yeah, but now you have coaches who are really talented, and on top of that, they have information to go with that. So now you have to filter it out, and there is such a thing as information overload, and I've seen it firsthand with some players who have flat out said, "Yeah, I'm thinking too much up there."
Paralysis by analysis,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So there's always a fine balance here, and Mike Elias even talked about it on the broadcast. You know, this idea of you try to make things as scientific as you can with what they have, but there's still going to be some art that comes into play there. And again, that goes into growth mindset, that goes into a player's mental makeup, goes into environmental factors around them, family life, what's going on with, you know, all those different things, you know, what kind of work ethic a player has. So, you know, but to bring it back, you know, we're very general in how we're talking about this, but to bring it back to
Well, it's the last week of February. You know, I mean, this reminds me of being around baseball and having football show up here and having Marvin Lewis and Jim Schwartz take me under their wing and Phil Savage and literally talking to me from the moment they got here, the football people here, the Ravens people. And this is 1995, 96. So now the Orioles have Doug Melvin's on his way out. Frank Robinson's on his way out. Pat Gillick's sort of on his way in. Phil Regan. Around that period of time, every football person I would ever meet would say, I can take that young man and make him better. From the minute I met Marvin Lewis, his whole thing was, dude, I'm not a coach. I'm a teacher. I take Peter Boulware's skills. I draw up ways to make him better. He goes in the gym, eats his Wheaties, comes out, and we study how to do this better. I was around baseball every day of my life for 15 years before this happened, right? Like literally with a press pass like you at the cages talking to Greg Biagini. They didn't talk like that in baseball. I mean, they just didn't. They just didn't talk like that. They just talked like, well, he's got the skill set. You know, he runs fast. He's a five-tool player. We'll bring Jeffrey Hammonds in here, and he'll be what he'll be. But then I would go out to San Diego, and Tony Gwynn would show me his little suite. This was literally a closet, dude. It was a friggin' closet. Like it was a closet. It was right off of the corner of the locker room. It was a closet, and he had videotapes in there. They were
Mhm.
stacked up. It was insane. I mean, I've seen this with my own eyes, and that was as modern as the San Diego Padres and Major League Baseball could be at the same era. And the football people were Mel Kipering and we're going to coach him up. And that was the thing with Billick always is I can take a player and make him better. I'm smart enough to study it and get them to be better. Baseball's gone to a whole different level with managing that. And again, the reason this team won 101 games is John Angelos, I'll give him big props for this. He hired Mike Elias
He
and
did.
got out of the way. And he brought in smart people, the same people that Eric DaCosta was studying to try to figure out how to do this in football better, the way Billy Bean and Moneyball and wherever the sport was going. And they've perfected this enough that their biggest detractor, Mr. Oriole Negative, just sits back and says, what are they going to come up with? Who are they going to fix
Yeah.
this year? Like I
It,
literally There's going to be 2 or 3 guys that are going to make a market improvement because, to your point, there's evidence of this. John Means, we go through the list. Canoe, Bautista. I mean, all of their stars were maybes in the old era. Maybe they would become Arrieta somewhere else. Maybe they would become whatever they would become somewhere else. But they could take Brad Bergeson and get 3 seasons out of him here, you know?
Yeah, and really, I mean, as much as you're looking for the major success story like a Yennier Cano, who goes from terrible quad A looking relief pitcher to pitching in the All-Star game last July, really what you're looking for ideally, and more realistically speaking, is even if it's just incremental improvement from everyone, right? 1% better, 2% better. And if you get that from enough guys when you already have a team that won 101 games last year, then that's how you endure losing a Kyle Bradish and hopefully bringing in another starting pitcher at some point in time, which I still think, whether it's by opening day or the trade deadline, I still think there's a good chance you're going to see that happen. I think you're going to see them bring in another reliever at some point. But in the meantime, yeah, you are taking a look at guys you have and you're looking for, whether it's Cole Irvin throwing 95 miles per hour, which he was touching in Bradenton on Sunday, which was something he was not doing last year. And look, it's one outing. Again, you don't want to make too much of it, but there's one example of, yeah, you're hoping some guys get better. And especially with your young guys. I mean, I look at someone like a Jordan Westberg. I think, we've spent a lot of time talking about the infield, but what about the outfield? We've had, the Orioles have had Cedric Mullins in center, Anthony Santander in right, Austin Hayes in left. And that's been what the outfield has generally been for 4-5 years. I mean, that was kind of the first group to kind of settle in this new era. But think about this, Nestor. Santander is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. Cedric Mullins is coming off of an injury-plagued season. He's going to be a free agent at the end of next year. Same with Austin Hayes, who was an all-star last year, but we've seen him wear down in the second half the last 2 years. That's not to say that those guys are going to be replaced on opening day or anything like that. Far from it. But when you're thinking through a long-term lens, I want to see Colton Cowser do what he did on Saturday, which was hit a walk-off home run, although certainly wind aided in Sarasota if you saw the contact. But I want to see Heston Kjerstad take the next step. What about someone like Kyle Stowers, who we were talking about a lot a year ago? And,
yeah, what's
he had
up
a
with
really
him?
rough.
I actually forgot his name. I called him Stout, and
yeah.
I guess I was thinking about the movies
Jordan
in the late
Stout,
70s.
the putter.
But yeah, like I'm like, where's he in all of this? I mean, there's only, to your point, we've already got 3 major leaguers and 2 other guys trying to figure out how to get in the lineup that's still 9.
Yeah. I think, in the case of Kyle Stowers, and look, let's be clear, as much as we were just giving the Orioles player development their flowers, that doesn't mean you're going to bat 1,000, right? And look, Kyle Stowers still is going to have an opportunity this spring, but let's face it, I don't think too many people are projecting him to be on their opening day roster like he was a year ago. But he's still in the organization if he has a good spring. I think couple questions for this team from a backup outfielder standpoint. Who's going to back up Cedric Mullins? I mean, Ryan McKenna has kind of been the default at times. And of course, they had Aaron Hicks on the roster last year, but who's the backup center fielder right now? Can Colton Cowser do it? It looked awkward when he was playing center field at Camden Yards last year, but he was a rookie. So you don't want to, make a definitive statement about where he is defensively, but someone's got to back up Mullins. Austin Hayes can do it, but if Austin Hayes is in center, then who's playing left? And left field is a lot like center field in terms of the ground you have to cover. So I think that's where Colton Cowser, Kyle Stowers, I'll throw another name at you. You don't think of as an outfielder, but his role has changed. Jorge Mateo. If you want to talk about a guy having value as a bench player, Jorge Mateo's got to play more than a backup shortstop at this point because you have Gunnar Henderson, and whether he's here on opening day or not, Jackson Holliday is going to be here in Baltimore sooner rather than later. You have already an all-star caliber shortstop in Gunnar Henderson and the best prospect in baseball. For Jorge Mateo to truly have some value, I want to see if he can be a backup center fielder. I want to see if he can play left field for them. And that's not as a starter, but as a guy that, can spell you in the late innings or if someone needs a day off. So there are some questions there. But going back to finish your question about Stowers, he had a rough 2023. We'll see how he rebounds. It might be, and look, he wasn't the number one prospect in baseball or anything like that. It might be that he's not going to figure it out to the degree that you hoped maybe
But
a
he
year
is
and a half
competing
ago.
with the number one
But
prospects in baseball. That's
he
part of the
is.
problem, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, and that's, that's where we are right now with this roster. You have a
You know
lot
what?
of
I want to do a
competition.
whole roster segment with you, man. Like
Sure.
I want to go soup to nuts with you and
Yeah.
where we are because I want to be educated as to where you think this is going because it feels real crowded. And it feels real crowded in a way like where they could deal something off and get an arm that could be very useful at any point
Yeah.
between now and July, whenever. Let's break. Luke's here. We'll get some. We'll just do a whole bunch more baseball. We've sort of been roundabout with Masson and shaky cameras, and certainly not a shaky front office on the baseball side. But the shake up that is going to be this year of what we hope is massive ownership change, massive sort of comeback to the city sort of thing, and some ideas and fresh ideas, and Cal Ripken and it looking and feeling different on the beginning of spring training this time next year. So we'll continue to measure this. You can find Luke, measure him at Baltimore Luke anywhere the interwebs travel and social media. Got a whole bunch of cool stuff going on around here in regard to sort of the development of what the new Baltimore positive is going to be. I've been working real hard on that, as well as Crab Cake Row and a couple Super Bowl, all the stuff up. All of it brought to you by friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'm going to get the Crab Cake Tour back out on the road. I have our friends at Window Nation in mind as well, and Jiffy Lube Multicare. We have a lot going on as we get ready for opening day. We're going to be doing some live shows downtown before baseball games on Fridays. I'm excited about that. So a lot of things happening around here that we will get you up to speed on, including the Ravens. The Raven stuff happening and combine stuff happening as well. Luke and I will be after all of that. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.